Justin Petrone, author of Mino Esti 1 and 2,
Yes.
and Montreal Demons.
Yes, and to be titled, but in Estonia, missionary position, missionary boss. That's the newest book. Yeah.
Thanks for being a judge in our contest.
You're very welcome.
How long have you lived in Northern Europe?
Oh, on and off for the past 10 years, I guess.
And what is the key feature of Northern Europe, if we were to play word association?
Key feature? Well, I'm looking out the window at some snow right now. I guess that would be a key feature. It's April, and I'll tell you the truth, reading these stories for the competition sort of reminded me things of I'd already forgotten about when it comes to life in Estonia. Just forgot that, oh yeah, it is cold. And oh yeah, the language is kind of complicated. I just hadn't thought about it for some time. I just took it at face value. That's what life is.
And a lot of people, when they think of Northern Europe, they think of just this chilliness. They might imagine an Ingmar Bergman film, for instance.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, did you get any kind of a sense of coldness, or I mean, what was the temperature of the entries?
Of the entries? I mean, I think that in a lot of cases, the writers had, experienced Estonia for short periods of time. And so there was sort of this, I hate to use the word superficial, I don't mean it in a way that they lack depth, but just, the immediate images of Estonia or Estonian people's personality, collective personality that greets you when you come from, let's say, the United States or the UK or someplace to Estonia is evident in the entries. You can see that right away. For these kinds of entries that deal with people coming to Estonia for the first time or things that happened here. Because, I mean, they're English language entries, so most of the...
Humor, speaking of which, and unexpected events and juxtapositions play an important part in your works, I think it's safe to say. How would you evaluate humor in the entries? Did anything make you laugh? Were there any LOL moments for you?
There were a few, but a lot of the entries, not a majority of them, but a sizable number of them dealt with historical events in Estonia, often from a first-person perspective, so there's nothing to laugh about that. Right,
sure. Would you say there's any kind of Sophie Oksanen effect taking place? Has she influenced these writers? Is it clear that they've read her?
Oh,
she's probably the most famous of...
Buddhistus.
Right, yeah,
Purge. It's hard to say. I think that it has to do with generations of people right now. Obviously, if we were holding this contest in the 1920s, then we wouldn't have these kinds of entries, but these kind of memories are still fresh and immediate to people, and they stick out when they look back over the past, their lifetimes and their experience with their relatives, their families in Estonia. So I wouldn't call it lowest hanging fruit, but it's very obvious for people to, go down that path when they're writing about Estonia, because it's what's on their mind, it's what's in their hearts. It's harder to write about, a typical day in Swedish Estonia, because who really knows what that was like, or has that sort of first-person experience?
Right, and the theme was pretty broad. It was life in Northern Europe. Were there any that weren't about Estonia at all, that were just...
There was one that took place in Latvia, I remember, and I kept waiting for something to happen with Estonia, but it didn't happen. It was just in Latvia.
But it probably qualifies.
Well, I think there was an Estonian sentence in there, and that was the most important thing.
That was. What was the best use of an Estonian sentence that you came across, would you say? If you can think of one offhand.
Oh, it's not coming to mind.
We'll fill in the blank later.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit that.
We're doing this before the actual judges have all convened, and I mean, the judging hasn't taken place, so... and I guess what I'm wondering is, at this point, do you have any kind of a candidate that you're going to go to the other judges with, or have you narrowed it down, let's say, without naming specific stories?
I worked through it. That I highlighted the titles of the stories that I said, okay, I like this one. This is good. And but at the end, I had about 8 or so that I'd sort of marked, and then I went through those again. And having the experience of having read through everything, I whittled down my list a bit. I know the other judges have done the same, and I expect we'll be working with this sort of group of stories. I don't have a personal favorite, so I'm fine if any one of these 4 or 5 that's my that I like the best would be selected. It depends on what the other judges think. I'm just one person, so.
Well, hopefully they will arrive shortly, and by midnight we'll have white smoke coming from the chimney. A couple questions about what you've been up to. Estonian readers are familiar with your columns, which you write for a popular lifestyle magazine, and also your blog.
Yeah.
But I think they may have been caught by surprise by Montreal Demons, which was a departure from the Pondering Estonian Themes. Was this something?
There is an Estonian in Montreal Demons.
It's not the main character.
No, he's a famous geneticist in Montreal Demons.
A real life character, or based on someone?
He's based on several real life characters. The book, it's funny. I've had people who aren't familiar with me tend to like the book, and those are people who have sort of read the My Estonia books. Are like, they don't take to it because they're used to sort of this warm, easygoing humor, and it's kind of a very dark, cynical book. I find it humorous in its own way, but it deals with some pretty heavy themes.
So people feel like bewildered, perhaps, a little bit.
Well, they're a little shocked, They want, it's sort of like Bob Saget, He's an American actor and comedian, and Bob Saget, he was on Full House, this American TV show, for a long time, playing this sort of lovable, goofy father figure to these 3 girls. 3 girls. And then he goes out on live shows that he does, which are positively filthy. And, some people went to those Bob Saget stand-up comedy performances expecting the lovable dad from Full House, and instead, he opens his mouth and every other word is obscene, and that's not the Bob Saget we know. And it's sort of the same experience with Montreal Demons. Right.
It goes a little bit farther than risque language and the character's habits.
Yeah, but the main character is not me. I think that people are sort of imagining me, and then when I don't do the things they expect me to do, they get confused, even though it's a different character, has a different name, background, everything, but they still see me as the character.
Is Estonian society still conservative, prudish about such issues, such as blow-by-blow first-person accounts of doing hard drugs and...
Yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting situation in Estonia. I've found living here that Estonian society is actually quite tolerant and liberal in the Dutch sense, let's say, but on a personal, private level. But when it comes to the public face of Estonian society, then it's quite stodgy, conservative. Which is to say that people's personal lives and public lives are so different that in your public life you're sort of this morally upstanding figure in society, but you also have a mistress and several illegitimate children, but no one talks about that because we don't talk about that.
Or it has a nice name, the Honeycomb family.
The Honeycomb. Well, it's interesting. Just because of the people I've known in Estonia, when you sort of especially try to piece the families together, like, oh my God, this is a pretty liberal construct. This is what you think of in terms of the new family. But if you listen to, let's say, political leadership speak, then they're very much old-fashioned family values and, sort of two-faced nature to life. I live in Europe in a way because I myself am, have socially liberal perspective, coming from the United States, where we were so used to arguing over these issues. It was such a relief for me to come to Europe, where suddenly we don't have to fight about these things anymore. I can sort of push all the commotion away from my life and sort of relax, breathe freely as a let it all go. Let it all go. Let's not fight about guns anymore.
And your latest book is called, at least in Estonian, Missionary Position. That's the translation.
Yes.
Into English of the
Yeah.
Estonian title.
I mean, the idea of it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with this sort of role that so-called Westerners, I hate that term so much, Westerner, because it's can we curse on?
Of course.
It's bullshit. But so-called Westerners come into Estonia thinking of themselves as sort of missionaries, or have some sort of religious purpose to spread their lifestyle because they have an innate belief that their lifestyle is right and good, even though, like I said, back in the United States, we're fighting about all these things. When we go abroad, we are now ambassadors of our lifestyle. And when I see that you too are enjoying the same fruits of consumerism as I can enjoy in America, then I feel touched and good that Estonia is on the right path as a missionary. This sort of idea that we're bringing something to Estonia and we have something to teach them. And I think the realization of, after living years here, is that there's very little that an individual person can do to change a country. Like I wrote in a column in the book, I can barely get my children to get their clothes on in the morning to go to school. So how am I going to change a country? But when you're at, those first steps you take into a country, sort of take yourself a little bit too seriously because of this, constructed East-West divide and the idea that Estonia is becoming part of the West. Like Mart Lahr said, the irreversible westernization of Estonia, which of course would include cultural missionaries.
Have you ever found yourself tempted to be a missionary? Do you still find that? I personally, reading your blog, don't get the sense that you...
Oh, that I have something to teach people?
Or are you annoyed by other people when they do that, other Westerners?
It's little things. We've had a really serious issue in our family when it comes to cuisine. That my daughters think it's acceptable to eat pasta with ketchup because a lot of the Estonian people around them eat pasta with ketchup. And I come from a second-generation Italian-American family where it's just not done, not thought of. In this way, I'm very conservative, and I find myself feeling like I'm some kind of elitist snob. How dare you tell us that we can't eat our spaghetti with ketchup? And some part of me just feels that it's so fundamentally wrong that I need to teach all these Estonian people the proper way to eat pasta. But it's not going to happen. They've won. There's more of them than there are of me. I can't even get my daughters to consider it. Although they love pecorino romano cheese. They'll eat the whole block of it in a night. But.
And they are making parmesan, or at least trying to, in Estonia nowadays. So
you can get decent Italian food in Estonia, but when it comes to sort of village level cuisine, and they just buy the macaroni at the store and squeeze a little red stuff on it. It's fine for them. But like I said, I don't want to lecture people, but I also have my own boundaries and my own sense of self-worth, self-respect about what kind of food we eat.
Thanks a lot, Justin Petrone.